Thank you, Brother Blair. The national piece of news that we get down in our area is the O.J. Simpson case. That's an almost national. But locally in Indiana, a Walmart has moved in just a week or two ago. And I hear the ladies asking each other, said, have you been to Walmart yet? But you know what the word is at Stoneboro? The heat. I'm wondering what fat people do in this kind of weather. I'm not sure. I'm working at it, trying it out. But you know, some time ago I was pulled up to a gasoline station. This is when, you know, they used to pump gas. And I've been a regular customer there, and we had a fairly good relationship, and he was older than I. And he was past the perspiring stage, something like a day like today, hot and humid. He was leaking all over. I said, Pop, this heat's terrible. Oh, I said, son, I can hunt the shade easier than I can build a fire. So that's always a good attitude, isn't it? So, we don't want you to enjoy the heat. Maybe you have to tolerate with it, but, just be relaxed, and if you must sweat, fan or wipe your brow, don't fuss. Just, be at home and relax. I've thought at times why I'm standing here. I'm not real sure, but I thought of a story I read some time ago. There was a cruise ship out, and all of one someone yelled, "Man overboard!" And so they yelled that right alongside the victim that was floundering. Another man dropped in, and so he kept them afloat, and someone threw him a life preserver and got him back on board. And there he stood on deck, dripping. And somebody said, after a heroic deed like that, we ought to have a speech. He said, well, really, I don't have a speech, but I have one question. Who shoved me? And I feel that way this morning. I want to know who shoved me here. But you remember what our topics were, the fight, the fighter, and the finish. And yesterday we talked about the fight, and I drew a dark picture, and I hated to, but that's just the way it is. The battle's going to be hard and maybe long, but I said today things would brighten up a little bit as we look at the brighter. But before I speak, I need some help. I need some prayer. Brother Larry Muir, principal of IWS and from the Hillsdale Church, would you stand and pray for me, please? I picked for a scripture verse yesterday in 1 Timothy 6 and 12. Paul, the apostle, the aged one, was writing to Timothy, his son in the Lord, and he told Timothy in his first letter, he said, now Timothy, he said, there's going to be a fight. He said, I want you to fight the good fight of faith and lay hold on eternal life. But when he wrote the second letter, I don't know what was going through Paul's mind. I can surmise. He said, as he sat down to write, he said he probably thought, oh, wait a minute. I told Timothy to get in the fight, but I didn't tell him what he had to do what kind of a fighter he had to be. So in 2 Timothy 2:3, you'll find words like this. He said, my son Timothy, maybe I forgot to tell you in the first letter, but I want to make sure this one thing, that I want you to know that as a soldier, you must endure hardness as a good soldier of the cross. And he that warreth entangleth himself not with the affairs of this life, that he might please him who hath called him to be a soldier. Be not entangled with the things of this life. I don't know how it is now, young people, when you start out for the Lord, but back there in the 30s when we started out, they'd call us sissies, mama's boy, a preacher. But you know, it takes that could be farthest from the truth to be a sissy. You know the old saying, any old fish can float downstream, but it takes a good fish to float upstream. And you are bucking the current, young people, when you go out into the world. But you know, God, somehow, He picks on those that are willing and able to stand for Him. And we want you, as you go through life, to be aware of this one thing, that you must endure hardness as a good soldier of the cross. Enduring hardness, no easy way of the cross. But you know, there's one thing that we like about this. Every time you go through a battle, you become stronger. In warfare, in the service, There's a difference between seasoned troops and green troops. The enemy knows where the green troops are, and if they're going to break through, they'll break through there. They're inexperienced, they're soft, they're tender, they don't know how to do battle, and that's where they choose. I know we have basic training, but there's a difference when you leave the basic camp and you go out into the front line. And this is where the test of endurance comes in. You get in the front line, you become seasoned troops by enduring battles. And every time you go through a battle, you come out stronger. And so the Lord bless you as you endure. And then he said, you don't entangle yourself with the affairs of this life. Before you're a butcher or baker or candlestick maker, young person, you are a Christian. I don't know what your vocation is in life. I don't know what it will be. But before you're either one of these, principally you are a Christian. You must walk like one. You must live like one. You might dress like one. And this will be the testimony to the outside world. Do not be entangled with the things of this life. I know when you go to the grocery store, they'll want your money. I know when you buy a suit of clothes or a car. But listen, these things, these affairs of life. In the political world, we call it conflict of interest. Nothing can be between you and your experience. And anything that would dull your experience or cause you to grow lean in your soul, you strive to keep away from it. Be not entangled with the affairs of this life. The story is told of a fellow back in the Civil War. He taken basic, and he could repair watches. And sure, the soldiers got to know about this, and they took their watches to him. They were in basic. They'd march some, and in those days they'd learn how to dig trenches, and they knew how to operate a gun and everything. And this went on for a few weeks, and finally, one day, the orders came, no more basics. He said, we're moving up to the front. And this man said, I can't go. I have 12 watches I have to repair before Saturday. He forgot why he entered the war. And that is why Paul is talking to Timothy, my son. Be not entangled with the affairs of this life to that extent that it curtails your ability to serve the Lord and your testimony. If we're going to endure hardness, I know there'll be some things that'll reflect our work and our labors for the Lord. I'm not sure what Paul was thinking about. Maybe he was talking or thinking about the many stripes he wore on his back, the beatings he took, the humiliation he had in front of officials. The Corinthian church would question his apostleship, and I don't know what all he was thinking. But one day he bared his back and he said this, let no man trouble me. I bear in my body the marks of Jesus Christ. Young people, I hope you never have to go through that. I know there have some that have gone. That may not be your lot in life, that you be physically abused to that extent as Paul was, that your body's scarred from the whiplashings and the beatings that he received. But if you live for Jesus Christ, you're going to carry some marks, some emotional marks perhaps. You might be ostracized from your family. That could be. You could be humiliated in the classroom. That's been done time and time again. And on the list goes. And while you may not bear any physical marks, you're going to carry some marks left by pressures and tensions and things as we go through life. I'm thinking of a singer by the name of Wagle. He was a singer all right after the turn of the century, and he started out singing and writing songs and was doing quite well. But all at once he felt the hand of the Lord on him, calling the full-time work. He had a wife, he had a little girl. He shared her views with her. He said, wife, I feel that God is calling me to full-time ministry. She said, nonsense. She said, you're working in construction You promised to support me. You promised to support our little girl. I'm against it. I'm not in favor. No way can we survive. We'll starve to death. You're not going out in evangelistic way. But God kept pressing. And he knew that if he backed down on life, that he would lose his experience. She said, if you go, I will leave you, and I am taking our daughter with me. He was booked with a meeting with that great Methodist preacher, H.C. Morrison. And they were in a revival effort camp meeting. And someone said, where's Wago? Where's that? Somebody said, well, the last time we saw him, he was headed for his cabin. H.C. Morrison knew the struggle between this young man and his wife. And he thought that maybe there could have been something wrong. So he went to Wago's cabin and found that young man prostrate on the floor with the letter in his hand. That big preacher, H.C. Morrison, lay down alongside him, put his arms around him and cried. He said, Brother Morrison, here's the letter. My wife is left. My furniture's gone. My baby's gone. She carried out her word. They cried. They prayed. Wago stayed with the calling. His pen was quiet for 5 years. Never wrote another song. Then one day the Lord spoke to him. And he started to write. He thought of the many times people would sympathize with him. He thought of the many times when people said, Wago, we're praying for you. He thought of the time when H.C. Morrison lay on the cabin floor, put his arms around him and cried. And he wrote this song. No one ever cared for me like Jesus. And young person, as you go through life, I know Wago carries some marks. And I know you may carry some marks as you go through life as a good soldier of the cross. But this is part of the endurance. We were going up from Camp Shelby, Mississippi. I did most of my basic training in Camp Shelby, Mississippi. We were going north to Pennsylvania, and we had a layover in Nashville, Tennessee. And this friend of mine, it was several hours on bus, and during the war, you know how things are running slow. And we got off of the bus and that we were told would have a layover. So I said to my friend Barb, I said, Barb, everybody's heard about Station WSM in Nashville. I said, we got time. Let's stroll down and see what it looks like. So we didn't know where we were. We were in a strange city, and young man come along. We were surprised to see a young man. Most of them were in uniform or something. And I said, Mac, we're strangers. And of course we were in uniform and had everything decked out, looking sharp. And he said, what's your problem? I said, it's WSM. Where is that in Nashville? Oh, he said, I'm going down that way. Follow me. So we said, good. But we only took a few steps, and he stopped. He said, wait a minute, fellas. I want to show you something. Put his foot up on the curb and pulled up his pant leg. It was all bruised, scarred. We said, what happened? He said, I was piloting a P-39 in Italy and hedge hopping, and the enemy shot me down. He said, I wanted it clear why I'm not in the service. But he bore the scars. Do you see what I mean, young people? Oh, we can tell a lot of stories. Bill Pierce, and some of you have known and heard of him, and I think he held, Night Watch or something, that program. But he said he was speaking to the Atlanta Falcons, the football team. And they were all there. It was hot, and they were there with their short sleeves. And he noticed something. The quarterback, his arms were all scarred and bruised and beaten. Do you know why they were that way? Those were the marks of his profession. That's where the enemy had tramped him and mauled him out on the football field. He bore the marks of his profession. And you and I, young people, will bear the marks of Jesus Christ. In our profession, in some way or somehow, we'll bear some mark. Let me give you a personal illustration about my mother. When Mom got saved, she got it good. And she thought everybody ought to hear and know about it. Now, she was the oldest girl in the family, and she helped Grandma raise the other kids, and that's the way they used to do it back there, help with the house. So she and Grandma were very close. So when we got saved, they'd been corresponding back and forth with Grandma. Grandma lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And in the 30s, that was just like in another planet. That was a long way from home. But that corresponded back and forth. And so when Mom got saved, she told. Of course, Grandma was a staunch Catholic. The letters quit coming. Mother suspected something, but she never quit writing. Periodically, she'd write to Grandma, never get an answer. Time went on, and this is where it came to a head. Grandma came to visit some friends 1 mile from the little mining camp where we lived and never came to see her daughter. Mother was devastated. How could this happen to me? She went to her pastor, crying, weeping. I never saw my mother upset like that. But he was very wise. He took a Bible. He said, Sister Andrie, look here. He said, the scripture says, when father and mother forsake you, then the Lord will take you up. The scar, while it was still there, was healed. But wait a minute, the story doesn't end. Mother kept writing. Finally it said, come, Grandma called for you. Got to pray with Grandma before she passed. But there'll be some marks, young people, you'll have to carry. Then we have to be committed to the battle. None of this, I don't know, slipshod, haphazard way. The Negro says it right, that God God don't sponsor no flops. You gotta be in there and fight. You gotta be, I like Uncle Bud's prayer. He said, of course he was an old farmer and quaint in his speech and everything else. He said, Lord, he said, give me a backbone like a saw log. He said, Lord, he said, give me ribs, just like the sleepers that run under the church floor. Give me a brass throat and leather breeches. Then on he went. But I like the way he ended it up, and this is what I want to listen to you. Lord, he said, help me to fight the devil as long as I have a fist. Help me to bite him as long as I have a tooth. Then gum him till I die. Amen. Say, that's the earmarks of a fighter that's committed to battle. A few months ago, a few weeks ago, some time ago, we celebrated our landing at Normandy. General Eisenhower, of course, is the commander-in-chief. Everything lay on his shoulders. But on that day, the greatest armada that was ever assembled went across the British Channel. 5,300 ships in 13,000 aircraft. 150,000 men upwards made the initial landing. But 20 years after the landing, Eisenhower made this observation. And this is what I want you to get, young people. He said everything that could go wrong went wrong. He said the paratroopers landed in the wrong place. He said the aircraft bombed the wrong place. And the troops landed either late or in the wrong place. Everything that we could do wrong, we did wrong. But victory was ours because we were committed to win. Now that's the part I want you to get, young people. We must be committed to win. No loss, no losing. We must determine in our hearts and mind that we're going to win. And then I find, as a fighter, we have to keep our guard up. We always have to keep on the alert. When you pull guard duty in the service, in the wartime it was terrible, but if they caught you sleeping, you know what the ruling was? Punishable by death, or as the court-martial may direct. It was a severe sentence. Because you know why? Because if you weren't alert when you should have been alert, it could mean your life and the lives of your comrades. So a good soldier always keeps alert. Always on guard. We never know when the enemy can come in, as I said, on your blind side when you're not expecting it. And I know sometimes when it comes to temptations and things like that, we're well aware sometimes when we know we're going somewhere, we steel ourselves because we know some of the situations we'll be going through. Maybe we have to because of circumstances. But many times the enemy comes up on your blind side when you have to make a split decision. But you have to make a commitment today to know what you're going to do. A pastor took his 14-year-old son for a ride one time and was talking to him about the facts of life. He said, son, he said, someday some woman's going to offer her body to you that is not your wife, and you're going to have to know now what you're going to do then. A young minister was going on a preaching engagement quite some distance in the country, and Nighttime overtook him, so he stopped at a hotel room for the night. Young man, young father. He went up to the lobby, dusk, and got his key and picked up his suitcase, looked around the lobby, and it was getting late. Just a few people around. He saw an attractive lady there and didn't pay any attention. And went up to his room and closed the door and started undressing. All at once there was a knock on the door. He said, I wonder who knows me in this strange city. No one knows me. I'm a long way from home. He opened the door, and there was that attractive young lady. She said, I see you're by yourself. I see you're lonely. I thought you could have some company for tonight. And you know what the devil did? The devil got on a young man's shoulder, and he said, she's right. You are lonely. You're going to miss the comforts of your life, of your wife. You're a long way from home. No one will ever know. But you know what that young man did? He closed the door. Because back there, he committed himself to walk with God. And young people, if the enemy comes up on your blind side and catches you unawares, we want you to know now is when you make your commitment to follow him. Because sometimes you don't have time. And Joseph, when the lady, Potiphar's lady, enticed him, he didn't sit on the edge of the bed. He said, well, wait a minute, let's think it's over. Maybe we can maneuver other. No! He got out of there in a hurry. And that's what we'll have to do when we come to a committed Christian life. We're talking about keeping our guard up, and I must hurry. Now, I didn't do too good yesterday. Somebody complained it was too short. Young people did. Some of the older ones full. But I'm preaching to the young people this morning. Keep your guard up. Remember the story in the Bible? King David was making his way towards the kingship. His commander-in-chief was Joab. Saul's commander-in-chief was a fellow by the name of Abner. Abner was a good man. He knew how to handle men. And he knew how to handle himself. And I don't have to go in detail. You remember the time when one of the younger men was in combat, hand-to-hand combat, and Joab, he said, please don't follow me. Don't chase me. Turn around. I don't want to kill you. Let me go. Let me alone. The man persisted, and Joab had to cut him down. Joab could handle himself. He could handle men. He was a good commander-in-chief, but he was on the wrong side of the ledger. He was with Saul when the Lord was raising David up to be a kingship. So when he recognized his problem, he went to King David. He said, King David, here's my sword. I see my mistake. I'm unworthy, but if you'll take me as a servant. David was overwhelmed. He knew the caliber of Abner. But Joab heard about this. Now, I don't know what all went on. I know the story how the man that Joab killed in a fair fight was related to Abner. And I didn't know whether Abner wanted to even the score or whether Joab was thinking, no, wait a minute. There's no room for two commanders-in-chief in this army. Maybe David thinks that much of Abner. He'll demote me and put Abner in my place. I don't know what happened. But the word come to Joab. Hey, Joab, did you hear the big news? Abner's on our side. He said, what? He said he just left King David's palace. Everything's okay. He's laying the sword down. And you know what Joab did? I like to talk to you a little bit, Abner. Here's that big soldier, Abner, able to defend himself, man to man, talking to Joab. And Joab pulled out his sword and stuck it under Abner's rib. And you know what, David? He raised his face to heaven. He said, Abner dieth as a fool dieth. He dropped his guard for just a moment, and it cost him his life. That's how critical it is. That's how crucial it is, young people. Never drop your guard when it comes to serving the Lord. Was it a year ago or 2 years ago? I don't know. When you get old, time gets away from you. But there were one old man and a young man fighting for the heavyweight championship. The old man's name was Foreman, 47. Now, if you know anything about boxing, a 47-year-old man doesn't belong in the ring. His opponent was a fellow from Pittsburgh by the name of Moore, 27. Now, that sounds more like fighting age, ability, capability. And this is how the fight went. Everything went well till the 10th round. I want you to listen closely. The judges had already awarded Moore 7 rounds. And in the 12 round bout, he had won the battle. He had won it. 7 out of 12 was the majority. He had won the championship, the heavyweight championship. But in the 10th round, something happened. Moore said, it was in our paper, I became lackadaisical. I dropped my guard. Foreman got in one lucky punch and the lights went out. And Moore was gone because he dropped his guard for just a moment before an antagonist that wasn't capable of doing it. It was, I don't know, never been done before. 46-year-old man whip a 27-year-old. But all because he dropped his guard for just a moment. Young people, I want you to be aware of one thing. I don't want you ever to be ashamed of the gospel of Christ. As the soldiers of the cross. They tell us in Paul's day, if a person would distinguish himself in a great battle, you know what they'd do? They would take that proud soldier who would distinguish himself in the battle, and they would brand on his chest the initials of the general he served under. He wasn't ashamed of that. He was proud to be a part of the force that won the battle. And we never want to get to the place where we're ashamed of our leader. In World War II, there was a British general by the name of Montgomery. And they called him the soldier's general. Now, I've read after him, and I appreciated what I read. But he was so close to his men that many of them were willing to die for him, and many did, just because they loved to follow their leader. They weren't ashamed to be called Monty's men, and that's what they call them affectionately. I am one of Monty's soldiers. There's words to a song that I want to read. I think I have it here somewhere. I thought I did. Am I a soldier of the cross? Well, I guess I'm not organized like I thought I was. But the last part of it, let's see, am I a soldier of the cross? But the last part, do I blush to call his name or things of that nature? In other words, it tells us not to be ashamed. Would you pardon a personal illustration if I could tell you how I got in trouble along this line? We were in a service I spent over 3 years in the tropics, and down in the tropics, it was the rule that you always slept under a mosquito bar. If you got malaria once, they didn't have to tell you the second time. But we all slept under mosquito bars. And so I tried to do what's right, and they elevated me to section chief. Now that's a big title, but it wasn't a big rank, just buck sergeant. But I had 9 men, radio operators under me. And I wanted to do what was right. And so, of course, I always read my Bible and prayed, I pulled a mosquito net down. I started to read. Can you see what I was doing wrong? I didn't want those other fellows to see me. You know what the devil said, Sarge? Listen to me. He said, them guys don't want to listen to a sissy. You'll have troubles in subordination. They want a hard-boiled sergeant. Giving them orders, then they'll take them. This went on for a couple nights. And then one day, the Lord spoke to me. He said, son, he said, after all I've done for you, are you ashamed of me? Brother, I got under conviction. The next night I said, let come with me. I rolled up my mosquito bar and read my Bible, go down to pray. We had a good outfit. And we nicknamed each other. I think about all of us had nicknames. They used to call me Dago. I think that's Hebrew word for Italian. I'm not sure. But then we had a big Swede. He was slow. He walked slow. He dragged his feet. He didn't want to use 2 syllables. He just used 1. He called me D. And it caught on. Even today when I meet one of the old fellows, it's D, you know. So I knelt down to pray. 4 beds down, they were playing poker. And one fellow from Punxsutawney said, hey fellas, not so loud. The D is praying. I learned the lesson then. Not to be ashamed of Jesus Christ. And young people, I want you to take that stand as well as you go through life. I must hurry. And then as we You know, I said that today it'd be a little brighter than it was yesterday. You know why it's a little brighter? Today we talk about the armor that God knows that we were going to have troubles and problems, and would win some, would lose some, and as we went on through life. So he said, I will give you an armor that'll make you more than conquer. And I don't want to take time to go through all the parts of the armor, but just hurriedly can we start with the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, girded with the loins of truth, the feet shod with the preparation of peace, the shield of faith, and the sword. Two things I just want to dwell on for just a minute, and then I'm done. I like to dwell on the mind, on the head. Do you know how important that is? Let me tell you how important that is. I want to read for you out of the book of Philippians, and I want you to listen carefully. You don't have to turn to it. It's short. Now you watch how the mind is referred to here, Paul in writing. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and mind through Christ Jesus. And then one day he draws the line, he adds the whole total up. He said, finally, brethren. Now watch how it deals with the mind. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, watch this next word, think on these things. In World War I, anybody ever see a World War I helmet? Oh, it was pitiful. It looked like a pancake. You know what it protected? Just the top of your head. But someone got smart in the Pentagon. By the time World War II come around, they devised a different helmet. And the World War II helmet that we wore was something like the World War I helmet that the Germans wore. It was the larger thing. It protected the nape of your neck. It come down over your ears. Because the army realizes we got to take care of that man's head, no matter how strong he is, how fast he is of foot. If he loses his head, everything's lost. And listen, young people, I want you to know you got to guard your mind. You got to guard your head. Listen, when these thoughts come, they're going to come thick and fast, and they're not always going to be pleasant. But listen, don't harbor them. Move them on. You know what Paul says? Don't worry about those bad thoughts. Think on these thoughts, good thoughts. And whatsoever things are of good report, think on these things. And then for just a moment, the sword. All these other things are in defense, to defend you. But you know, one football coach says, you can't win games just on defense. You got to move out. Get on the offensive. And young people, as a good soldier, we want you to go on the offense. In other words, find something to do. Ask your pastor. Maybe there's some doors you can knock on. Maybe there's some absentees you can call on. There's work for you to do out there, young people. If you busy yourself about the things of the Lord, you'll make yourself a strong soldier. And you'll give a good influence. You know, they tell us that, psychologists tell us, and I know it varies, but they say we always touch at least 17 people round about. I know there are ministers here, there are teachers that touch far more than 17. But on the average, we do. And as a soldier, when I was talking about letting down your guard, if, God forbid, it happens, when you fall, you pull someone else down with you. Do you know that? There's somebody watching you all the time. You're influencing somebody for good or bad. And we want you to keep your guard up and your influence. Here, back to the sword of the Spirit. We must make advances. We must take over enemy territory. Those people down the street that are unchurched, that don't darken the church door, invite them, work at it, build up your own faith in God. But let's look at it this way for just a moment. Anybody ever hear of Marshal Foch? In World War I, he was the field marshal that was in command of all the Allies' troops. In the Battle of the Marne, he was outstanding. But during this battle, this is what happened. Listen to this. he sends a communique to his chief, the chief marshal. He said, my left flank is yielding. My right has been broken through. Listen to this. Situation excellent. I am attacking. Do you see that kind of a spirit? The sword is the spirit. Things may be, I painted a dark picture yesterday, I'm well aware of that. But even in the darkness, as Foe said, my left is yielding. My right is being broke through. Situation excellent. I am attacking. Guess who won that fight? You know who won the battle of the war. Because of that man's outlook in life. He would not back down. He would go on the offensive. You know what he finished by saying? The best defense is an attack. Moving on. So young people, as you move on through life, we want you to put on the whole armor of God. We want you to go. Vic Sanders prayed. I always listen to people when they pray. And he prayed thusly. Said, Lord, help us to guard our own souls. And young people, that's your first priority. Keep yourself solid. Keep your feet on the ground. Be in the place where God can use you. You'll be a strong soldier. You'll endure hardness. Don't be entangled with the things of this life. Put God first in all your life. Thank you.